I am Lisa May Young and welcome to Holding the Space. Today I'm thrilled to be speaking to archaeologist, historian, author and broadcaster and the coast guy, Neil Oliver. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for making time for me today.
Oh, no, I'm absolutely delighted. Now, you've been very, very busy touring the country. Tell us all about your book, The Story of the British Isles in 100 Places.
Well, I think, simply put, really, it's an answer to a question that I was asked many times. People, recognise me when I'm out and about and come up and say hello and talk about Coast and other documentaries that I've been involved with. And quite often would ask, you've been everywhere, where should we go? What are the places we should visit? And it's a very difficult question to answer in 5 minutes. So the book is really the considered answer to that question that I've always wanted to give. Each of the 100 places is somewhere I've been, somewhere that resonated with me. And I felt that if I just assembled them, the 100, into chronological order from oldest through to most modern, that they would explain to me the places that I think tell a story of the British Isles. That if you visit these places and know these stories, you get an understanding of how we've ended up with the civilization and society that we have.
Yeah, I mean, from reading the book, and my nose has been in it since it got released a few months ago. It almost feels like a journal to me. It's, you described it as a bit of a love letter from you to the British Isles, and I'm just wondering how your love of history began.
I suppose I grew up in a very ordinary, normal household in Scotland. I grew up mostly in Dumfries and Galloway. My mum and dad were interested in history. There were books in the house, fiction and non-fiction. They were keen readers, and when my mum and dad would take us and my two sisters out on day trips and holidays, we often visited places of historical interest. Then at school, I was very interested in history. It was a subject that seemed to make sense to me because it explained, who we were and where we had come from. And it was just a natural progression. Both of my grandfathers, my mum's dad and my dad's dad, both survived the First World War, which fascinated me. So when we studied that period of history at school, I felt connected to it. I felt it was part of my family's story as well as being something that had affected, the whole of the planet. And that's really it. It's been a lifetime's enthusiasm. I'm not a historian. I'm an archaeologist. It was archaeology that I studied at university. I'm really just someone who's fascinated by history. I read history books. I visit places, and hopefully my enthusiasm for the subject comes across.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There was one particular line that I loved in the book, and it was, "This is my love letter to the British Isles. There is more I could write, much more, but this will do. I love this place." And I really felt the emotion coming through.
Well, it's the truth. I think most people, you get to an age, I'm 52 now, you go through periods when you're younger where you're a bit bashful, I suppose, about talking about love and who and what you love. But I've got a family of my own now, and I'm in no doubt about how much the place matters to me. And by the place, I mean the whole of the archipelago. And I feel, especially really on my children's behalf, that we live in a uniquely safe, liberal, and tolerant place. It's not perfect. There's always room for improvement with everything, but I always say, compared to where else is better? Where else gives most people a better chance? And I think the answer to that question, in all honesty, is nowhere. There are other places that are safe and tolerant, but nowhere more than this place. And I'm endlessly grateful, not just that I have grown up here, but that my own children have the chance, the privilege to grow up in a comparatively safe and peaceful place. And I feel, as I get older, I feel a sense of responsibility for the place. And I'm president of the National Trust for Scotland, and I got involved with that charity because I feel that it is important to try and do something to help look after the important places in the landscape so that future generations can learn from them. So it's a part of an ongoing process, and I don't care who knows it, that I regard this place as the best place on the planet. England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, the whole place together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you really feel that sense of emotion coming from yourself, and you're currently visiting the Kingdom of Fife as part of a UK tour through the books, and you've had to add 30 dates to your tour, which I'll be honest, I'm not surprised about at all. And in Scotland, you're coming to Kilmarnock, Dunfermline, and Dundee. So what's it like touring the home country then?
Well, it's that old adage about singing to your aunties. It is different. I mean, to be quite honest, when I'm away down, maybe in the southwest of England or maybe in the west of Ireland, you can kind of you can get away with more because I'm an outsider in many ways to say, the southwest of Ireland or the southeast of England, but when you're at home, when I'm absolutely in the country that knows me. Last year I did a gig in Stirling, where I live, where my children go to school, where we go to the shops, and you can't pass yourself off as anything but what you really are. People know me. So I'm familiar, and the way I talk, and there's less kind of license for making things up and trying to get
a little bit of artistic,
Aye, you get a bit of artistic license somewhere else, but in front of the home crowd, you're pretty much exposed for exactly who you are.
Oh, definitely. So
it is different, but again, I had some of the warmest reception. Glasgow Theatre Royal last time was, probably the warmest reception I got out of the 39 nights that I did on the first half of the tour. Although again, I got surprised, warm welcomes in places that surprised me. At Liverpool, fantastically warm welcome that I received there, and in Brecon in Wales, places that I didn't expect, the kind of instant warmth. But I got it, but it's in answer to your question. I suppose it's the most apprehensive. It's like doing something when you know your mum's watching. You think, I won't get away with much here. So it keeps you on your toes.
Now, on Saturday, the 30th of November, you're coming to the Carnegie Hall in Dunfermline. Do you have a favourite story from Fife history?
Well, gosh, you say the Carnegie Hall. I've quite often remembered, I even say to my children, one of the anecdotes about Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, is that he used to tell people that most people overlook opportunity because it comes wearing overalls and looks like hard work, which is a great line. We've got a Carnegie Library in Stirling. The local library was part of his philanthropy that went all around. The story, the whole story around. On the east coast of Scotland, I talk about Montrose and the part that it tells in how we became a set of islands rather than being a peninsula of Europe. Arbroath Abbey, which was the scene of the Declaration of Arbroath, obviously a legendary foundation document for Scots. The letter written by Bernard de Linton to be read out to the Pope to try and push the point that Robert Bruce ought to be identified as an independent king of an independent country. But what I hope, you see, as well as I do try and reflect local sensitivities everywhere I go, but I want it to be a unifying story. And I try to, whether I'm in the northeast of Scotland or the southwest of England or in Wales or in Ireland, I want everyone to do what I do, which is to care about all of the 100 equally. Because I see I've seen so much of the place over the last 20 years that a lot of the national boundaries have blurred for me. And I feel as at home in Belfast as I feel at home in Aberystwyth, as I feel at home in Edinburgh. And I want people to get a sense that the story of the British Isles is a story that has resonance for everyone. Whether you're from County Cork or Fife or Cape Wrath or Cornwall, that we are united in the same way that I used to say that the coast was a uniting feature. In some respects, there's only one coast. The world has one coastline. And people who live on the coast, whether it be in Britain or in South Africa or in the west coast of North America, there's a shared experience of living in that space between the land and the sea. And so I want the story, whether I'm talking in the Carnegie Hall or whether I'm talking wherever I'm talking, I want people to feel a sense of responsibility and ownership for the whole place.
You're president of the National Trust for Scotland. I was wondering, if you had access to infinite funding, what projects would you support?
Oh, well, I would like. If you're going to ask a question like that, I would have the whole of Scotland under the bailiwick, under the umbrella of an organisation that has the mindset of the trust, which is to protect, which is to pass on, protected and unviolated, the landscape that we have, both built and natural. So at the moment we have, the trust looks after a swathe of landscape, say like Glen Coe, and it also looks after all sorts of castles and buildings within cities and gardens, Inverview, places that will resonate with people. Culloden Castle. I care very much about Culloden Battlefield, for example. I've been quoted in the past because there's a planning application that has gone through on the fringe of the battlefield.
Yes, absolutely.
Which has enabled house building, and I worry about what that precedent might open the door to. It makes it that bit more likely, that bit easier for other planning applications to get through. And I feel that there are places you need development, you need an economy, people need jobs, and people need houses. But you also have to be mindful that there are some places that simply should be set aside as having an importance, a significance and a resonance that transcends the immediate need. And it will matter in 100 years and in 1,000 years' time, because they tell us something very important. What happened at Culloden, so much, the consequences of it were great. There was the undoing of a whole way of life, which was the Highland way of life, which was compromised. The clan system, which had been in decline for several generations by that point, it was a further nail in the coffin, and led on to other upheavals like the Highland clearances. So it's significant. People should know what's at Culloden. So I would want to take care. I just feel a sense of the necessity to take care of the whole place.
Because you wouldn't build a housing estate on the Somme.
Well, exactly. People need homes. There's no question of it. And, there's in some parts of the United Kingdom, there's a housing crisis and a housing shortage, and people can't afford homes, and that's a challenge that has to be met. That's a wrong that has to be righted. But you don't. I wouldn't build a motorway through Culloden Battlefield, and I wouldn't put 10,000 houses in Glen Coe.
Now, I was wondering, with the popularity of social media these days, and you had a brilliant line in The Rise of the Clans, and it was Queen Mary swiped right on Darnley, which I thought was brilliant. How do you think history will view social media?
Oh, well, it takes a long time to come to terms with a technological advance on the scale of internet and social media. The Industrial Revolution, which began in the 18th century, is still the aftershocks and the consequences of that are still rolling out across the world. And the technological advance, which is the internet and online and social media, I think it's going through a very messy birth. And if you were asking me, I would say that I think social media has, at the moment, is more harm than good.
Yeah.
Like any technology, it's in its application. Nuclear, the splitting of the atom by Ernest Rutherford in 1917 made possible nuclear power, which is a potentially benign source of clean, affordable energy, but it also made possible, mutually assured destruction in the form of nuclear war. So it depends what you do. It's not the technology that's to blame. It's not the advance. It's how people use it.
And where you go with that.
And at the moment, social media is causing a lot of people a lot of harm.
And a lot of anxiety as well, yeah.
A lot of anxiety. People like me who straddle both. I mean, I obviously had most of my life before the internet and before the online problem, and that gives you a perspective. If you can remember life without mobile phones, before smartphones, before Facebook and Twitter and the rest, then you can see what you don't take it in the same way as someone who, like my children, who've grown up in a world that's only ever been about online and the internet. So that the challenge really is greater for them. They take it for granted. They might be the most used to and most becoming the most experienced in exploiting it, but in some ways they're most vulnerable to it because they can't imagine a world without it.
Yeah, and that phone's constantly in your hand, so it's